I am Harrison Long. I'm the business development manager for Kline Landscaping, and this is my colleague Jason Kilmore. So you guys have probably seen me a lot, but not him. So I wanted to introduce him and I guess give you a little bit about himself and his background and a little bit of insight into his expertise that he'll be giving you today.
So my name is Jason Kilmore. I'm the Vice President of the Maintenance Division here at Kline Landscaping. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. I do have a degree from Penn State University with landscape contracting, actually, and my minor was the management side of it. So getting into plant pathology, took a bunch of soils classes, so stuff that we won't get in too deep here, but definitely have some expertise in it. So thank you.
So that's a little bit on his expertise. Obviously, we are not, a gardening company. We're a landscape and construction company. So we are going to do our best to adapt this to more of a personal at-home course, but also want to give you a little bit of overview on some stuff that's going on in the county as it relates to landscaping and may affect. I'm just trying to figure out how to go into the next slide. Okay. So what we're going to learn today is first we're going to go over literally all the dirt on soil. We're going to talk about the difference between dirt and soil, and we're going to go through the components of what makes up soil, things that affect the soil in your yard, and how to deal with it and get your plant material in your gardens working with the soil as opposed to against it. And then I really want to leave some time at the end to open it up to any questions that you guys have, and we'll do our best in helping you answer questions that you have at your personal garden or your yard the best way possible. So going on, just to give you a brief overview of Kline, we are located out in Laytonsville, Maryland. We are actually celebrating 48 years of business here in 2020. It's a second generation family owned company. So it was started by JB Kline. And then since about the early 2000s, Brian Kline, who is JB's son, has been running the operation. And then as far as a footprint, we really work with commercial properties and commercial properties and communities, but also do residential supplemental projects throughout the year. So I think as more I learn about the chamber, I think there's a lot of opportunities to help you guys with your residential projects. So please feel free to engage us with questions on this presentation and also just questions and projects we might be able to help out with. We offer landscape maintenance, snow removal, landscape enhancements and design, hardscapes, and landscape construction. Oh, and then one just quick announcement. I don't know if anyone saw on my LinkedIn. We actually just got listed by the Washington Business Journal as the #5 largest landscape construction company in the DC area. So that was something that we announced this week. So we're very excited to announce that. And it's very cool to see, how JB Kline has grown and will continue to grow. And we're honored to be up there with some of the top names in the industry in this area. So go check out my LinkedIn and my post and let me know if you have any questions about that. Going on with the presentation, all the dirt on soil. So the big thing we want to start out with is that dirt is actually not soil. It's unwanted soil, and that's the definition of dirt. The big three things that actually make up soil are going to be your minerals, the combination of water and gases, and your organic matter. And I'll let Jason kind of speak to the traditional mindset there about soil and introduce our fourth component there, which has really become the new way of thinking of soil.
Yeah, so when you're dealing with soil, any one of the three traditional components of soil will affect what you're trying to do with your landscape, your plants, or any other thing. So as some of you may know, you go into a new home, a lot of times they strip the organic or the topsoil off your land, and then you're left with subsoil, we like to call it. And that's really not good for growing plants. It doesn't have a lot of things to hold the nutrients into it. And if you're in different parts of the county, you may be dealing with a heavy clay soil that will tend to stay wet longer and not drain as well. So you might see more root rot in your plant material. If you go out to the Bay or even to Ocean City, you're going to see heavy sand soils. They're going to drain a lot quicker. They're supposed to. That's what they're there for. So soils are made up of these things, and what's in them can really dictate how well your plants do in them. And it also dictates on what we tend to do with the land as far as where we put certain buildings and commercial sites and things like that. So those are the three traditional components of soil. In the past couple of years, we've really started moving to this fourth component, which is looking at soil as a living organism and treating it as such. So there's a lot other things that are in soil, like nematodes and different good fungi and things like that, that we want to help build and make healthier, that really help the plants. They work together in this close ecosystem. So we really started in the last couple of years, 10 years, start really looking at the life of soil. And it's pretty cool when you start getting into that aspect of soil.
Yep. So we want you to just keep in mind that soil is a living ecosystem, and you'll see kind of how that trend goes throughout this presentation. So the big thing is that soil varies in a couple of different aspects. And what makes up your soil makeup in your yard is going to be a different combination of those four components. So the key is to be able to identify what's going on in your soil, and then adapt, what you want to do in your garden and what you want to do with your lawn to that, soil type. So I guess, if you want to explain kind of how it varies. You kind of touched on it, how it varies around, parts of the country and, over in the Eastern Shore versus here. But it can even, vary throughout your own property. And a lot of that has to do with the age of your home and the age of your property.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind as you're going through and you're looking at your soils, a lot of times, and I'll share this experience, we had a hard time getting grass to grow in a certain area, just wasn't looking good, and there was a lot of foreign objects in it, to where a developer came through and just wood chipped right over this park, and it actually didn't really come show the problem until a couple years down the road, to where the ground was almost like a trampoline, and we couldn't get turf to grow properly. Here, there was all this foreign objects in the soil, and we actually had to go in there, remove it, put in good soil, and wouldn't you know it, our turf took off. So that happens a lot. I see a lot in residential homes where, the pH is way off, and come to find out that someone cleaned out some concrete down the road, and it's affecting one particular area of the landscape. So you got to be mindful of that when you're having issues, and maybe plants are stressed out a little bit. So,
all right, I want to get a quick thumbs up. Is everyone picking up what we're putting down and with us, and can you hear us all right? All right, cool. So the next question you're probably asking is, what the heck should we do to figure out what kind of soil we got, and how can we, figure out how to make our lawn and garden better using that knowledge. So, the structure of the soil is going to change, how everything reacts with it. It's going to affect the draining ability and the ability for your soil to hold nutrients. So all things to consider. And, the ways, there's a couple different ways that you can go about figuring out what is in your soil and what to do about it. So I'll kick it off to Jason to talk about some of these ideas here.
So the first thing you want to do is match the plant to your soil. It's much easier if you have a certain soil to match a plant to that soil, if you can. If you don't want to do that, then obviously soil tests are very important when it comes to getting your plants healthy. So soil tests can be as easy as a pH test that you can buy at Home Depot, and it will show the pH. You can get lab tests done where you take samples of your soil and you send them to a lab, and they will basically measure what's in your soil, how much NP and K, nitrous, phosphorus, and potassium is in there, and even your micronutrients that are in there, to where you can go out and get an actual bioassay, which is they measure the living organisms in your soil, which is a very detailed test. Based off of this testing, it kind of tells you where you need to head for the plants you want to plant. So if you're planting turf and your pH is a little bit too acidic, you're going to have to change that by liming. If you're planting an azalea in acidic soil, you're pretty much good to go. And soil pH is a big thing when it comes to plants. A lot of the stuff that we see and a lot of the problems that you see in the landscape It's just the pH is off. And throughout the years, what was happening as we sprayed fertilizers and turf and your broadleaf control, it changes the pH of the soil. So when you're really going down to start looking at your soil, you got to start with a soil test. And from that, it's going to tell you what you need to add to get the best results. And it might mean that you have a heavy clay soil that you need to add more organic material or topsoil to improve the drainage, to allow your nutrients to hold better into the soil and things of that nature. So really starting with the soil test and going from there. As we get into it, you may have to import soils like I was talking about. You know, you might have to add the sand in the topsoil. If it's really sandy, you may have to add clay to go the other way. And then the other thing here that's a big thing is creating this living organism, and it's referred to as the poop loop. So these nematodes come along, they eat the organic material and then fertilize the soil, and it creates this continuous loop that keeps the soil healthy. And that's really where your bioteas and things of that come into nature to treat the soil. All right, so cool. So that's all we got about soils. We're going to switch over to pesticide laws, and I think this is a big thing that's affecting Montgomery County. Montgomery County recently became the first county in Maryland to ban the use of pesticides on turf, which means that we're starting to see a lot of stuff this year pop up in the turf that you haven't seen in the past. Currently in the state of Maryland, Montgomery County is the only county that put these laws into effect. Most likely we'll start to see other counties within Maryland to start doing this, such as PG County, Howard County. I know they have legislation on the books right now to move to a pesticide-free environment. There are some jurisdictions within Montgomery County that have not opted into these new pesticide regulations. So they aren't in the city of Gaithersburg, and you have the list there. You can read down through it.
And actually, I was on a call with the mayor of Gaithersburg, Judd, yesterday, and he said that is something that they're going to be talking about in legislation, which, you know, whether to opt into the Montgomery County laws or not. So it's definitely something that's relevant in the Gaithersburg area right now. So we thought it'd be great to educate you guys on, you know, kind of what the law is and, you know, how it will affect your lawn and your you know, landscape. And then you guys can make an educated decision on, you know, whether you want to support the idea or, you know, maybe don't support the idea and, you know, want to see that legislation change a little bit. So we thought it'd be a good thing to talk about today. And then right after this, we'll open it up to a Q&A. So if you have any questions on soil or anything like that from what we talked about before, please write them down and ask us at the end. And then any questions that spark from this or any random questions you have, we'll have a little dialogue at the end here.
So the new laws, which came into effect this year, it bans the synthetic pesticides. So basically, the main rule of thumb is you can't use anything with an EPA label on it now. So that basically, and it's only in turf right now, but that takes away your broadleaf control. So you're starting to see dandelions more, clover more, a lot of different broadleaf plants. It also banned the use of pre-emergence, which we use pre-emergence to control crabgrass basically in the spring. So you're starting to see more, especially as these temperatures warm up and get humid, you're starting to see more crabgrass. And the use of glyphosate, such as Roundup, is no longer allowed to be used in the lawn. The ban applies to lawns, playgrounds, mulch recreational areas, and children care facilities. However, the law does not ban the sale of these products in your big box stores. And the reason behind that is that you have residents that live on that Frederick-Montgomery County line that maybe they shop in Montgomery County. That was the reason behind it. But you still cannot apply it to your own personal, by law, your personal lawn. So you can buy it all day long in Montgomery County, but you shouldn't be applying it by law.
They haven't quite gotten together a police force to just police lawns yet. So it's kind of, it's really neighbors reporting neighbors and things like that. So I don't think, you necessarily have to worry about, getting arrested for putting these things down on your lawn. But if you have a neighbor that's really, I guess, concerned about the environment and has a strong opinion towards that, they might be looking, to make sure their neighbors aren't putting that stuff down. So I would just keep an eye out and, keep that in mind.
As of right now, fertilizers are not banned because they're part of the Maryland Department of Agriculture. They fall under our nutrient management laws to protect the Chesapeake Bay. So as long as you're staying within the state guidelines of your NP and K being put down, you're still good to go. So your lawns will still get fed and things of that nature. So it does not affect fertilizers. What to look for is if you see a product with an EPA registration label, that's usually a quick thing to say probably shouldn't be using this under the new laws. What is good though is that your certified organic material review, the OMRI, you can use those products and you might see them, cornmeal, gluten, things of that nature do have some pre-emergent capabilities. And if it's USDA approved for organic gardening, those can be used. So the whole switch now is really trying to keep back to what we were originally talking about, keep the soils healthy and keep your turf healthy, which the majority of turf we have in this area is called fescue. So we're going to do some other, we're going to talk about some practices there to keep your turf healthy and try to keep those weeds out now. Golf courses, agricultural operations, and municipalities are exempt from this. Obviously, golf courses, if you guys golf out there, there's a lot going down out there. They're dealing with a lot of different types of turf out there, and they're cutting it very short, which it needs to be dealt with a little bit different. So in agricultural operations, obviously with growing crops and stuff, they need to have some weed control out there to get maximum yield in their fields. So. And
municipalities that list, like the city of Gaithersburg, city of Rockville that I listed earlier in the slides. But yeah, so some expectations for 2020 lawns. So with no changes to your fertilizer application, you should still be able to see your lawns with that dark green color like usual. But as Jason was talking about, you're going to see more of the weeds, like your dandelions, your broadleaf plantain, crabgrass in the spring. Anything else that they would be seeing?
Black medic, or violet, all kinds of stuff.
Okay. And, with this being so new, there's not necessarily, a great sample size of what organic materials can do to help you. And there's not really a lot of those in the market yet. So we're going to touch on some alternative organic products that have a little bit of data on them. But at this point, it's such a new, thing. There's not necessarily great answers. But we're going to be doing trial and error, and hopefully we'll have a better handle on that and a better recommendation as we go forward in managing this. Anything you wanted to add there? So yeah, to go over some best practices.
We do have tall fescue in our area. You may have some other warm season grasses I see out there that people have planted, but as a general rule of thumb, the majority is tall fescue, turf type tall fescue. And tall fescue actually likes to be cut between 3 and 4 inches, and we're starting to get into the summer months now. So our operational practices here are starting to raise that deck up, cutting it at about 3.5 inches. Turf has a shoot to root ratio, so the taller the shoots get, the deeper the roots will push into the soil. So if you can grow it a little bit taller, it helps to prevent against drought, which will stress the turf out. But as temperature rise, tall fescue is a cool season turf, and we'll start to see it go dormant, turn that brown color as we get into the July, August kind of time frames. A really good thing to do is do not remove grass clippings. Make sure you're not cutting more than 1/3 of your grass off. Leave your grass clippings to break down. They can provide a ton of nitrogen for your turf, and it's just best practices to do that. The other thing, and this is probably something on the residential side, you got to keep those mower blades sharp to have a nice clean cut. A lot of times when I go off the turf and it kind of looks white, is the mower blades aren't sharp and it's actually tearing the turf instead of a nice cut. So that allows it to dry out a little bit worse instead of this nice clean cut. At JB Kline, we sharpen our blades twice a week. so that we keep that turf nice and cut evenly. As you get into the fall months, and now that we're not putting down those pre-emergents in the spring, aeration and overseeding is a big thing to help improve your turf. Aeration is a great thing to do, and it breaks up the soil, lets that oxygen flow down to the roots. It also helps control thatch. And then the overseeding just, brings the life back to the lawns. You can do hand weeding, if your lawn's small enough. I'm not going out and weeding my 3 acres or hand weeding my 3 acres. That's taking a while, but you can do that. And as we get into some of these hot days, and if we get into a drought, you want to water infrequently and deep, and that goes back to making those roots push deep into the soil, and it just helps prevent them from going dormant a little bit more. So I think we have next. Yeah, organic products. So, cornmeal gluten has been shown through, I think, the University of Iowa or Iowa State showed that cornmeal gluten, which is a byproduct of feed mills, does have some pre-emergent capabilities. But the one problem we have in Maryland, because we're so close to the bay, is that to really get those desired pre-emergent qualities out of cornmeal gluten, we actually are breaking the nitrogen application rules. So I haven't been recommending that simply because I don't think you'll get a lot out of it. And we actually are going against the laws of how much we can put down nitrogen at any given application. But I think there's something there that as industry gets around these products, we can potentially make them better. Bio-teas are really good. They don't really control broadleaf, but what they do is make the soils healthier, back to that organic living material thing we talked about in soil. But the big downfall here is they're not rain fast. A lot of the chemicals we've used in the past are rain fast after a certain amount of time. So you can be thinking you're putting down a certain rate, and if you get a good rainfall, it can lower your rate. And so you kind of lose that ability to have nice controlled applications. But again, they're good. And I've seen them do some good things out there using them on a daily basis, a yearly basis. And right now, Fiesta is on the approved list, which Fiesta is kind of a cool product. It's an organic product, and it actually has shown good results in controlling broadleaf weeds in your turf. It's not a weed killer; it's a weed suppressant. So basically, you're stunning the broadleaf weed in your lawn, and it does help the lawn get a little bit healthier, and it is an organic product. So there's been some promising data coming out of Fiesta products, and I'm looking forward to see what else happens there. Right now, it's a little on the pricey side. Obviously, it's new to the market, and a lot of people want it right now, so it's a little bit on the pricey side. But I think over time, we'll get more products out there and it'll be better.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think as far as the cost that you're going to incur from implementing an organic treatment process, unfortunately, is going to be more expensive. But like Jason says, as it becomes more popular and more widely accepted, and there's more people producing things like that, we should be seeing the prices lower. But right now, you should expect to be paying probably 3 times as much for the organic treatments as you would in traditional treatments. So just something to keep in mind, and something that we're really advising, communities that are going through budgeting processes and things like that, and commercial property managers going through budgeting, to keep that cost in mind as they go into the next season. I think that is pretty much. Oh, just as far as action items, that you can do based on this is, number one, perform a soil test. Going to get that home test from Home Depot, or if you are really having an extensive issue, maybe even sending that soil out to a lab to be tested. So then you can at least, consult, an expert on what material will be best based on your soil. And then seek out advice from gardening centers and licensed contractors. Engage your landscape contractors such as JB Kline, and then visit. I'd encourage you to visit the Montgomery County website. It has even more information on the new laws and their best practices as well. There's some cool educational videos on there. So if you want to take a look at that. Just type in Montgomery County new pesticide laws, and it'll take you to the page. Or you can also look at my LinkedIn and my post. I posted it a few months back. So with that said, I would like to open it up with questions. Again, feel free to ask any questions about anything that we talked about today. And I'm hoping really you have some more questions specifically about your guys' gardens and yards that we can help you answer. So feel free to unmute or, just blurt it out however you want to do it.
Yeah, there was a couple questions that are up in chat. Paul asked what prompted these new regulations.
There's, as more and more we see, states like California, the glyphosate maybe cause cancer causing, and there's a thought process out there that, if they're not used properly, which you as a resident can buy everything I can buy. The only difference is I buy a concentrate and I get trained. I have to carry a license. I have to keep records of what I put down. The homeowner does not. So if they're misused, they could potentially cause harm, and it says so on the label. And I think people are worried about the long-term effects of chemicals in their landscape where children play and things of that nature. Now, there's a lot of government and regulation around these chemicals, but there was a lot back. Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring, with DDT, and you could see what that happened to the bird population. So I think there's concern out there of what are the long-term effects of the chemicals we're putting down, and it's not this. Is there another way to do it that where we're not using that? I think that as soon as the Masters was televised in color and everyone saw those green fairways and putting greens, everyone wanted that in their yard, and that's what really created our industry, to have that nice turf, and that's where we're at right now. And I'm not here to say it's good or bad. It's the law, and we just got to follow it and educate, and whatever you feel comfortable with, I think is the most important thing. And what do you want to see out of your landscape? Some people are okay with clover, and it's okay. Clovers are, up until the 60s, they used to sell seed with a little bit of clover in it. Clover fixes nitrogen out of the air into the soil. It's actually a cool plant. But we've gotten accustomed to seeing no clover in our turf, and we're just adding the fertilizer afterwards. So, it doesn't kill your turf. It's good. It just, to me, it doesn't look as good, but.
That's a great question, Paul. And there are some more information on the county website as well as kind of what sparked it and some of the diseases and, long-term health effects that are associated with it. So I would encourage you to go to the county website and check that out.
And Cliff had a question. Can the soil used in a raised bed garden be used year after year, or does it need to be replaced?
I wouldn't say it needs to be replaced. I would say you most likely, from a soil test, of once you see where your nutrient level is you're probably going to have to add some fertilizer year after year. I wouldn't be pulling it all out and putting it back in. I would be taking a soil test, and depending on what plants you want to grow there, you can usually put that on a soil test, send it out to a lab, and they will give you actual recommendations of how much you need to put down to get the desired nutrient levels for your soil. The only time I would recommend replacing is if it's not draining well, or something to that effect, a physical characteristic to the soil. But as over time, your nutrients are going to get used up, and you're going to have to replace the nutrients, which usually means a fertilizer or adding some kind of organic material to your soil. So a soil test, you'll hear me say that a million times. Soil tests are key whenever you're doing any kind of work.
And there was a question from earlier too. So do you know if the University of Maryland Ag Center, they used to do the soil test? Do you happen to know if they still do them anymore?
No, unfortunately, the University of Maryland does not, from my understanding, but you can go out. We use private firm CLC Labs out of Ohio. I think a soil test is like $15, and they give you a pretty detailed printout. And they give you the thing to put your soil in. You gotta make sure it's dry, but they give you a good report back. Penn State, they still do soil tests. But yeah, University of Maryland, I think, does not anymore. So.
If anybody else
But
has
the
questions.
University of Maryland has an excellent extension agency. Stanton Gill, a lot of those guys out there are very knowledgeable and are willing to help a lot of residents. They are, as far as your landscape and stuff like that, they are awesome at the extension agent in Maryland. I've been to a bunch of classes with those guys, and they are very knowledgeable and willing to help the residents of Maryland make sure they're seeing stuff, and even the farmers of Maryland. So those guys are great over there, Chuck and all those guys. So and Judy, they're there to help, and it's a great resource. If you haven't used them before, they're awesome. They'll help you figure stuff out too. So the extension agency of Maryland is great too. So.
Does anybody have any questions? You can just-
I have a
I
question.
do. Go ahead.
Do you want me to go for? Okay. I think you guys are doing a lot of really cool information about the soil. I'm really kind of into it. And I saw Paul wrote on the chats, you can use vinegar water to kill grasses. It kind of made me ask this question. I've got a really long driveway that's all millings, and I have grass growing in my driveway, and I don't know, I've just never owned a house before, and I have 3 acres of grass, and it's like insane. So how do I kill that grass? Is that, is that good? I don't want to be dumping pesticides on my driveway constantly, or rather weed killer or whatever. I nuke it with this pretty gnarly stuff right now. So.
Great question.
So for driveways and hardscapes, the law, if you're in Montgomery County, does not prevent you from using Roundup and glyphosate on that. So what you can do, and it's a really cool product out there called SureGuard that we actually mix with our Roundup, and it's a liquid pre-emergent. And we were on a job site down in Six Flags, and they kept having to pressure wash this one area to keep it clean for visitors. And it had all these cracks and kept growing weeds. You spray the Roundup, the weeds would grow back. So this product, SureGuard, it's very expensive, and you got to mix it a certain way. But it would give you 3 months of control where it doesn't grow. And it's a great product. And, the right product put down at the right rate, and it will give you that control for 3 months. So therefore, you're not going back every week spraying more and more glyphosate. You actually use less product at the end of the day. The other thing that I've done in rock beds and stuff like that is use a Snapshot is a common pre-emergent, and you can kind of sprinkle that down at the correct rate into your hardscapes, and that will give you probably 6 weeks control of it's a pre-emergent again. So it's really the way pesticides work is you got pre-emergent, so you're basically burning off the cotyledons of a seed. So you got your leaves that come out of the seed and it burns those off. And then you got your post-emergents like glyphosate or Roundup that will kill the plant after it's emerged. So that's how it really works in our world with chemicals. So that's what's going on there. So those are 2 products I would check out if you can. But again, that SureGuard is, a little bottle's I think $150, but it'll last you probably 15 years. You only use a little bit. So.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. Chelsea, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm asking on behalf of my sister. I unfortunately don't have a garden. But going back to the soil test, and you kind of answered it already, and it depends on where you live, but from that soil test, does it tell you like what types of plants or what kind of soil is best used for certain types of plants and like produce and stuff? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, typically when you do your test, you tell the testing facility, especially if you go like CLC Labs out of Ohio, you say, I'm growing a vegetable garden, I'm growing turf, or I'm growing trees. And it will kind of tell you what you need to do. But what you can also do is once you get your soil test, you can go back to your nursery. And a lot of times when you're trying to buy something, it will tell you pH ranges, what kind of drainage it needs, all that stuff right on the label. And you can ask any of your garden professionals, and they'll tell you if it's going to do well or not, and I have this type of soil, would you recommend planting it there? you know. The other thing with
Mhm.
plants is always keep a lookout for light. I mean, soil and light, rain is pretty much what they grow, what they do. And I've seen a lot of people put shade stuff in full sun, and then they don't understand why it dies. You got to really match your plant to your site and use your vision, not your sight. You know what I mean? Like think long term, or don't put a white pine 2 feet off your house. You're gonna have foundation issues, you know. So you really got to think ahead and what this plant's going to do, and that's why they, you know, when you go to buy plants, it lists all that stuff out there, and that's how we know where to put plants. Is after a while you get to learn it, but you know this thing's going to max out at 40 feet tall. You know, probably going to be planted there. It looks really pretty now, but you know, 20 years from now, your kids are chopping it down.
Mhm.
I think we all fall trap to that would look really good and not really getting into the nitty gritty of how it's going to work in the desired spot that you want it to go in. Any other questions or any questions about like?
I got one, Harrison. I got one real quick.
Go for it.
I have beautiful hydrangeas right outside my door, but unfortunately they're in the way of a fence I'm putting up. So I don't want to get rid of them. I want to move them.
Okay.
Something you guys, would recommend? Would you test the soil in other gardens to put it?
Yeah. So here's the thing. How long has the hydrangea been there for?
I would guess probably 10 or 15 years.
So the issue is you got to prepare a plant to move. You know, think about when you guys move to a house, you box up all your stuff, you do all that kind of cool stuff. Well, you know, you got to kind of prune those roots back, get them kind of doing some stuff before you move it. And my suggestion is that a hydrangea, you could probably buy a hydrangea for $30-40 versus the cost of moving it, because what you're going to do is you're going to disturb all that root structure, and typically it won't transplant well. Because it's not in that environment to be transplanted. You know, when you're in a nursery and they're growing them in containers, all your roots that keep that plant alive are in that container. When you put them out, they shoot out, right? They want to get past the drip line and all that stuff, because that's where all your water, your nutrients are. There's not a lot of water falling underneath canopies of trees. So all your fine feeder roots are out there. So and it's been allowed to grow for that long, all that stuff, and you're basically cutting that off. If you do want to try it, I would always recommend either spring or fall, not in the middle of summer. I see a lot of people do that. And I got to research hydrangeas, but, you know, some plants like your spruces, like right now, they just flush out growth. And you got to wait till that growth hardens off or it's dormant to transplant it, because if you don't, you'll kill it. So, you know, plants like to be moved at certain times. Typically that's spring or fall, when it's either dormant or it's going dormant or the growth is hardened off. So a lot of stuff going on there, and it's not a simple yes or no, you know. But typically I would recommend, you know, if you're at that point, buildings usually win because they're more expensive. And so, you know, you could buy a 3-gallon hydrangea and probably get better success out of it than trying to transplant at this point, would be my recommendation.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That was a good question. Any other questions like that? Anything got any specific projects you got going on right now that you want some consultation about? We got about 5 more minutes here. No. All right.
Oh, so
Thumbs up
awesome.
if you learned something today, I guess.
Thank you so much. You guys did a fantastic job. So,
Awesome.
so if can I send out these slides to everybody?
Yes, you can. Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
I sent you the slides, right?
Yeah. So
Feel free to check them out.